Hey everybody, I'm Anna McEwen. And now for Bob Switzer with the Epic Narrative.
Well, everybody, we are still in chapter 2. Why? Because this is epic. Welcome to the Epic Narrative, everyone. And unlike last time, I promise we will be done with this chapter today. I promise. Bob's giving me the sarcastic look. Yes, now, come on. I mean, there's only like 3 verses left. What are the... yeah, you're right. I did get stuck on verse 15 for an entire 45 minutes. So you're right. It still... But no, that they all tie in together very nicely. I'm confident based on my outline, we will get through. I know I was confident last week, but no, remember when I read the verses, I was like, yeah, I might not make it through that last 3 verses. And I was correct. I could have, but it would have been, an extra long one. And I probably wouldn't have done those last 3 verses justice, because I would have been like rushing through it just to make a point that I could finish the chapter. So here we go. During that long period, I laugh because I'm going to get stuck in a period of time for a little while because, man, it covers like 40 years. But let me continue. The king of Egypt died. The Israelites groaned in their slavery and cried out, and their cry for help because of their slavery went up to God. God heard their groaning. He remembered his covenant with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. And so God looked on the Israelites and was concerned for them, about them. And those words we'll break that honestly, right? Those last couple verses, 24 and 25 they're epic in their own right. They're just awesome verses of comfort for so many people who are suffering. That God, hears and he remembers and all that stuff. We will get into that. We will. But they are great verses. And I think sometimes because of how wonderful they are, most preachers, and again, this isn't a knock on them, right? Some of them only have 20 minutes to make a point so that everybody's happy so they can go home and say, wasn't that a wonderful time at church? We had wonderful coffee and donuts, and we had a nice conversation in the cafe, and then we went in and heard an amazing concert, worship concert, and we even sang a little bit along with them. And then, the preacher was really good today, very entertaining. I liked the joke he told, and boom, like we're done. Hour and a half, and I'm now spiritual. Okay, I joke, but that's another whole thing. You can listen to my Bob Thoughts if you want to hear some of my evaluation of the current paradigm of church and how it desperately needs to change. Desperately. I don't think it needs to change. I think it is changing and has been changing, and the amount it changes will continue to grow over the years to come because it cannot be sustained in the old model. Just can't be. There you go. I've said it. Big churches will take a lot longer. But trust me, it wasn't COVID. It wasn't COVID. The paradigm of church was shifting probably 5 to 6 years before COVID shut everybody down, at least for a few months in some places. Some places were shut down for a year or plus. But anyways, again, see, don't get me started. Oh, this is probably, again, one of the reasons why I'm still an unemployed preacher is because I can't go back to the old paradigm. Just can't. I've seen too many amazing things that God's doing in the future. I've hung out with so many people that are involved in it, and yet, still no job being produced by it. But man, I'm excited by what God's doing. To me, that is the essence of the revival in the church, and it's not happening in the churches because they're dying. All right. On with the conversation. On with the conversation, Bob. Maybe I'll end up doing another Bob Thoughts on it because now my head is swirling on, yes, God does hear and he is active. And verse 23, during that long period, that long period, almost 40 years have passed in this sentence. It is fascinating how quickly the Bible skips over years of what I would consider kind of, it's not mundane, but it's kind of like nothing of significance was noted during those 40 years in Moses's life or in the life of the Israelites and Hebrews in Egypt. Literally, people just trudging along for 40 years, hoping that life would get better. Moses living his life, right? Now he has 2 sons, and he's taken on, the feeding and shepherding and of flocks, the trading, the interacting of with merchants for other goods that they need in the household, for his household, for Raul or Jethro's household. I know we went over that last week as well, why he's called 2 different names. And I'll try not to interchange them. I'll try to pick one and stick with it, but I just wanted to throw that out there just in case you missed last week. There is a reason why, and I will tease you to go listen at least to the last, I think about 4 minutes of the podcast. You should get a briefing on why he's called 2 different names. Now, one of the things that came to my mind when I was thinking about what was 40 years like in the desert for Moses, I thought, this is a man who was trained in a very specific manner of leadership. He was trained in the paradigm of control. He was trained in the paradigm of rulers rule and everybody else submits. Now, I know because of the philosophy that he would have been taught by Greeks and Africans and Asians. Like, he would have been taught that there are other forms of leadership, servant leadership specifically, because those things did exist and there were those types of leaders. And philosophically, and quote, I guess academically, he would have been aware of these things, but it would not have been the way that he would have been pursuing. It's not the philosophy of leadership that he would have been pursuing. So he's out here with sheep, and I believe part of what he's doing is he is gaining a different mindset when it comes to leading, or at least learning to balance his mindset when it comes to leading, because sheep are an interesting group of animals. Herding sheep, and I know that wasn't the only thing that he herded. It wasn't like he was only a shepherd of sheep. I'm sure that there were goats and there were mules and there were other, cash crops, so to speak, that he would have been involved in connecting with. But I think the Lord's goodness shows up here in that even though he's feeling like this is kind of not a waste of time, but a lost opportunity to be great. Now he's like, well, this is a good life. It's fine. I got a wife, got 2 kids. I make a good living. I'm part of a really great family. They took me in like one of their own. Jethro is amazing. I'm good. It's all good. I'm good. And God in his goodness is actually working at a much deeper level over time. Over those 40 years, he's really knitting together a different filter, building a different framework, creating a new paradigm. Oh, so many phrases. I love it. For Moses to operate when another opportunity is going to present itself. And God knows all the possibilities that are out front. Do I think, we'll say it again, do I think that God was manipulating the circumstances like some sort of chess master or puppeteer in order to bring about the ultimate reconnection of Moses back to Egypt and the leading of the Hebrews? No, I don't, because I don't think God has that kind of paradigm of leadership. But I do think he understood how it could get there. And I do think he knew the possibility that if Abraham, not Abraham, if Jacob decided to go to Egypt and stay during the famine, if Joseph brought his family down and got them a place to live and told them to stay and gave them great jobs in Egypt, and if they chose not to leave even after Joseph died and they stayed, see, these were all their choices. I think God just kept seeing the possibilities, and he's like, eventually, there could be a possibility. There could be a way forward in which Moses could get called back to lead my people out of Egypt. Because I don't think, I said this in season 2, I don't think they were supposed to be there. I don't think God was like, I need you to go down to Egypt. I need to save my people. No. He wasn't out of options in the promised land. He wasn't. He just wasn't. Anyways, I understand, some of you still have that picture of God. That's fine. You can go with that. And you can still believe God is good, and I think that's awesome. But you have to do some pretty interesting theological gymnastics to look at what he, quote, did to his people and still call him good. And you can't just toss it up in the air and say, well, God is God, and his ways are not my ways, and his thoughts are not my thoughts. So I can't really say, and he's righteous and he's holy, and I'm just a worm and I can't think his thoughts. And then you have more gymnastics, right? Because Jesus said he gave you the mind of Christ. So do you think his thoughts or not? He said he gave you a new nature in order to interact with the Holy Spirit, who will teach you all things. Are you being taught by the Holy Spirit, or do you periodically just tap into what? These are the twists and turns that you have to answer to, which is fine. I had all the answers at one time as well, but now I just see God as good, and God as a God of the possibilities. And he's like, my goodness is going to be ready at every choice you can make. So I think he's preparing Moses because one of the things you learn in herding sheep is they need mercy. They need mercy because they could get under your skin because they just don't pay attention to their circumstances. Well, technically, they can't really see anything around them. They're pretty nearsighted. You need to be patient with them. You need to be very caring of them. They need everything. You need to put oil on their head to keep the bugs away. You need to wrap them up. You need to herd them together so they can follow each other. You can't let them get too separated, or they lose track of one another and start running off a cliff somewhere. They need help when they're hurt because they don't know what to do. They end up hurting themselves more, so they actually need healing by the shepherd. You need to plan where to eat because they will literally eat themselves in a circle down to the dirt, and then they can't find anything else to eat. They don't know where to go. You have to lead them. You need vision. You need to lead them where they're. You need to, in essence, tell them where they're going, then lead them there, because you can't just point. You can't say, "Hey guys, head that direction." Like you could do for a dog or for a horse, where you could say, hit them on the butt and tell them to go home, and they will. These guys need constant attention and love and mercy and kindness, because odds are they would die without you. These are things that God is weaving into Moses' life, and I don't think he's weaving them in there and Moses is going, oh, I need to know this for my future leadership position. I need to know this for my future opportunity to be a ruler over millions of people. No. This is a brilliant shepherding of Jesus. God, wonderful counselor, mighty God. Like he comes in and he literally weaves together your life in ways that you don't even know what he's doing until the moment comes where you need it. And then it's like, wow, I'm fully equipped for what it is I'm doing. God's like, yes, because I'm preparing you for every possibility that could come forward. I'm preparing you because that's what I do. I'm in the processing business. I process everything with you. I make you everything you could be. In case anything happens, you will be ready, because that's how good God is. It's an amazing opportunity. and Moses doesn't even know it's going on. See, Moses had been trained in, like I said, the control mindset of leadership, that paradigm where rulers rule. He was a hunter. What do hunters learn? You learn all kinds of things on how to take advantage of your prey, how to show up where they don't expect you, how to wait for them in a way that they don't know, they don't see you, and they're just doing their regular routine, and you're able to take them out. He was a warrior. He understood strategy against large armies. He understood the group psychosis. That's not halitosis. Halitosis is the breath, right? The group dynamic that could occur based on what you could do, how you could intimidate through sound, through visual activities. And he understood how to negotiate peace without any battle, because he understood how to threaten the lives of those that he was in front of, and how they'd rather have their life and deal with the terms of peace than be brutally killed by the army in front of them. And he understands this. Like, that's what he was trained in. The political tactics, as much as he hated them, he understood them. He knew who to talk to, when to talk to them. He knew who his enemies were. He knew who his friends were. He knew when to apply pressure to his grandfather, when not to. He knew where to walk and when not to walk there. He knew what to wear, where he was walking. He knew what, do I wear the full trappings of being a prince because I'm going to an ambassador's house, or do I wear something much more low key because I'm going to observe the taskmasters and I want to see what they're doing and if they're obeying the law? Like, there's all kinds of things that he understood, and the impact that it could have, who he talked to, how he talked to them, how he greeted them. I mean, we see that now, even now in the Middle East, when there's, international conferences and stuff going on, and somebody has a faux pas. Unfortunately, currently, it's been often our president who forgets what country he's in, or forgets that he's not supposed to touch certain leaders, or he's supposed to, whatever, where he's supposed to sit. But Moses would have been on all that. Like, he would have been trained in all this. He also understood his personal strategies, goals. These are things that he had to keep in alignment with his overall vision of ruling the nations. And I believe his goal was to rule both nations, the Hebrews and the Egyptians. He did not, I do know people adamantly disagree with me on this. And so if you listen to this, you are listening to a radical position. But I don't think Moses was fully aware of the covenant of God with Abraham. I think he was nominally aware of it, but I don't think he was fully aware of it. And so I don't think he saw the promised land as having to be Canaan. I think he saw the promised land as wherever the Hebrews were. And he figured they could be here in Egypt and I could rule them both. I could bring these two great nations together. Now, let's see, personal strategies, powerful people. All right. So, there it is. Powerful people needed to be powerful, or other powerful people would run them over. Your goal as a powerful person was not to lead people, but to control them. So as Moses is putting life together out there in the wilderness over 40 years, Moses led his flocks well, right? They grew fat. They grew strong. They reproduced at numbers that were never seen before in this area. And this is all based on oral traditions and legends. So yes, these are extra biblical, but people observed his wisdom, his creative wisdom, his ability to see ahead, to make plans based on nuances of weather and landscape, to pattern the birthing time, the timing of birthing, so that births were taking place as much as it could throughout the year. No other shepherds fought with him. After he took out those ones around the well, his reputation was pretty secure that you just didn't mess with Moses. Didn't matter how old he was. You just didn't mess with him. And then his actual shepherding skills and leadership skills made him very much appreciated by all the other shepherds and leaders of that nation, of the Midian nation. They wanted his wisdom. So he was well respected and maybe a little scary. He found pastures outside the normal places. He found valleys in various areas of the mountainside that others hadn't found yet. They were actually shocked, it says, at Moses's flocks in their consistent improvement year after year after year. And Jethro also, of course, benefited from this. Zipporah and her sisters all benefited from this. Moses had a reputation of being a joyful, positive man whose families and flocks seemed to reflect that attitude. I don't think Moses spent 40 years in the doldrums of depression. I think after he had a wife and he was enjoying his children, I think he really believed he had a really good life. It wasn't what he had expected the first 40 years of his life, but he's sitting down going, I could do this. I could do this till I die. This is amazing. Look at where I live. Look at how I live. Look at how free I am. I'm guessing at this point, he doesn't look Egyptian anymore. He looks Midian. He looks like everyone else. He dresses like everyone else. And he regales them with periodic stories of pharaohs and warriors. And I'm sure some of his shepherds, he might have even given some hand-to-hand combat training to shepherds. I'm sure he did to his sons. I mean, every father does this with his sons. They teach him how to wrestle a little bit. Come here, son. Let me wrestle you. And Jethro prospered and he gained back, it says that he gained back his respect and honor in the region. Now, some believe that he stepped back into the role as priest because Moses introduced him to the God of the Hebrews. And even though Moses had been around and interacted with many idols, he, much like Jethro, saw that they were just worthless, that they were just, the priests that were there were just talking out of their own heads. They weren't connecting. Now, I'm not, please, some people are going to be like, they're demons in those idols. I know. I do know that when you don't worship God, you open yourself up to the enemy, and the enemy will take advantage of any on-ramp that you give him in order to kill, steal, and destroy anything he can about your life until your life is gone. Yes, I know. I'm not taking that away. I'm just saying in these 40 years, I believe that Moses became more and more convinced that there was one God. And I believe he became a real follower of Yahweh. And I know that in the Jewish tradition, he never stopped that. He learned it at his mother's breast, and he never stopped worshiping Yahweh as the only God, that he never worshiped any other idol, that he was almost basically sinless his entire life. I do know that there are large segments of the world that believe that about Moses. I don't want to take that away from you. I'm just giving you another perspective. The epic narrative perspective. And that's all. So Jethro gained back his respect, his honor in the region. And I believe that the two of them were leading people to the God of the Hebrews, the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. I think that during this time, Moses no longer was interested in his Egyptian connections, in his Egyptian roots. He became, as he's out in the fields, and I'm not saying he was day-to-day shepherding, but he was, as he interacted with the flocks and the shepherds and his family, he realized, I don't align with the philosophy of Egypt. I was trained in it and I was really good at it. And I thought at one point I might even rule over it, but I'm really more aligned with who I came from. I'm more in alignment with my Hebrew heritage. And that's where, that's what I think he started to connect with and really grew in his connection. Now, in verse, yes, we're still in verse 23. Bob's like, we are never getting out of this chapter. We are. I promised everyone. And so we're only 25 minutes in. It says, I know, he's like, yeah, in 4 words, but forget it. Just pay attention. All right. The king of Egypt died. The Israelites groaned in their slavery and cried out, and their cry for help because of their slavery went to God. Boom. Now, God here, Elohim is the word. The Israelites groaned in their slavery, and their cry for help went up to God. Elohim is considered a ruler, judge, true God. When it says it came to pass, these are, again, that's a phrasing of years, 40 years. I think the only reason why we know that a Pharaoh died is because this was a point of interest to the Hebrews. I think that they put their hope in a change of leadership. They put their hope in a new Pharaoh bringing new policies. Now remember, they had their own elders, they had their own priests, and the elders and priests would have worked with the government, the current government, to try and ease the requirements of work because they didn't want to leave. And don't freak out over that. How many of us would much rather live where we're living and deal with more restrictions than go through the, quote, hassle of packing everything up and having nowhere to go? They had nowhere to go. In their mind, what were they going to do? Go back to Canaan? They didn't own anything there. They were an immigrant, a nation of immigrants, a nation of slave immigrants. They had given up all of their position and all of their influence in Egypt, and now they just were trying to survive. This is the classic mentality of somebody who is a slave or orphan, somebody who doesn't have a home. Now, I use that word carefully, orphan, because I know that the Hebrew nation wasn't an orphan, right? They had their father God. I get that. They had their heavenly father. Yes. But what I mean is they were an orphan nation. They had nowhere to go back to. They couldn't go back to Ur. They couldn't go back to Babylon. They couldn't go back to Canaan. In a slave mentality, slaves are always looking to survive. They're just looking to make the master happy enough that their lives are easier. Unfortunately, a lot of people look at God that way. They look at God as a slave master. I'm just here to serve, and to try and survive in this world until I get to heaven. And then somehow at heaven, suddenly God's no longer going to be a slave master. He's just going to be God. And I'll just worship and serve him for all of eternity. And I will like it because my preacher said I will. And I believe it. And it goes on and on. I quoted something the other day on Facebook. Man, it was a horrible saying. And I thought, man, I don't want this to be true, but it is. And it was some of the meanest people I know more about the Bible than I'll ever know. And it's true. I didn't want it to be true, but so many people know so much about the Bible, and they literally manipulate, control, and beat people over the head with it. They're some of the meanest people. I've seen people, belittle and steal the identity of amazing men and women in order to maintain control. They literally use the same paradigm as the Egyptian pharaohs. They enslave those that they should be working alongside of. Pastors have enslaved their entire congregation and made their congregations happy about it. You better be happy, because you could be enslaved by, the enemy. But now you're a slave to God. And I know there are New Testament things to work through, and maybe you stick with the epic narrative. We will eventually get to the New Testament, and we'll deal with it at that point. But wow, that's the way they looked at God. That's the way that they viewed their position in Egypt. They had nowhere to go. Let's just hope that we survive. Let's just band together. Now, it does band you together for sure in a survival mindset. People who have survived tragedies are incredibly connected. I mean, even natural disasters. People who have survived natural disasters become incredibly bonded together. People who have survived cancers, they have these groups. They get together. They are bonded together. Or addictions, they get really connected. So this nation is incredibly connected over this idea of surviving slavery. And I believe they had hope that when the Pharaoh died, they get a new Pharaoh. And their elders were like, we will talk to him. We will let him know what our demands are. We are in a good position here. They can't, run the nation without us. We will get what we want. And it didn't happen. Things got worse. Things got worse under the new Pharaoh. And it was clear that nothing was going to change. Politics had failed them. Wow, how many people have put their hope in politics? How many Christians have I'm not saying you shouldn't be involved in politics, but when your hope is in a politician to bring about your freedom, you're in the wrong place. If your hope is in a preacher to bring about you're in the wrong. If your hope is in anything but God, it's in the wrong place. Because what did God command us to do? We go back to our identities from Genesis 1. You are to take dominion. In other words, take control of yourself. This is on you. You can't look around you and say, well, I can't help it. There's regulations and there's things I have to do. I can't. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? That's the attitude of a slave. What can I do? There's nothing I can do. Can't fight City Hall. I can't. What am I going to do? I can't. Well, there are things you can do. And maybe I'll bring it up in Bob Thoughts at the end. But there are things you can do. You can free yourself. And there's many who have, millions who have. So you do have options. You do have options. And they had options. But they had put all their hope in politics, and it got worse. All their elders had failed to come through for them. So then they cry out to God. Now they cry out to God. Now, was this the first time that they cried out since the killing of the babies? I don't know. But it seems to be a different mindset of crying out. When you're just surviving good enough, and they hoped that, the Pharaoh, things would get better with a new Pharaoh, and then they could just stay. They could get back. They kept trying to capture something from the past. Remember, I hear stories of the good old days when Joseph was here and all the brothers were still alive before they all died off. Like we had it good. We had it good. We were wealthy. We had influence. We were our own people. We had this beautiful land. We had this beautiful city. We were building more villages. And everybody's like, yeah, I wish we could go back there. Another little side note. So many people in business, in church, in their own homes, think that they're bringing forth a great vision, but they're actually just bringing forth a great memory. They just want to go back to something that used to be good. And that is not vision. That is not moving anybody, yourself, your family, your congregation, your business. You're not moving forward if all you're trying to do is either maintain or recapture something else. Memory is not vision. And I believe that they had a memory of what it could have been, and they lost out on it again. They've now been at this for several generations, and it keeps getting worse. Now they cry out. They realize, man, we are stuck. The plan didn't work. Their cries went out to God in a different way in that it required a response. It wasn't just a ritual. So many times our prayers are just ritualistic. We just say things to God. We don't require a response. It's not a relational conversation that we're having with him. That's the nuances of this language. They cried out to him in a new way. It wasn't that they didn't pray, that they didn't go and do, whatever it was the religious leaders wanted them to do, or the elders were asking them to do. They did all that, but it wasn't working. This time was different. This time it went up a notch, went to a different stream. It required a response, and it went up to God. If they had done this earlier, what would have happened? I don't know. Were they just pawns in God's plan? I don't think so. You could say, but Bob, he prophesied to Abraham that this was going to happen, and after 400 years they'd be freed. That is one way you could look at that. Or you could say he warned Abraham that if they went down to Egypt and stayed there, that this would happen. But if they do, God was still going to be there. And after 400 years, because God understands how people operate, he understands how long it takes for people to change. He understands because he loves us and knows us so well. And he's like, if they go down, things are going to look good for a while. But eventually, probably, about 400 years in, they're going to need somebody to get them out. And I will get them out because I am good. It wasn't a requirement for the nation of Israel or the Hebrews, but it is what happened. And God knew that there was that possibility. So no, I don't think that they were just pawns in God's plan. We've been over that before. Had they turned to God and cried out to him earlier, would he have changed? Yeah, I believe so. Well, then he would have been lying to Abraham. No, because it was just a possibility. It was not a requirement. I don't think they should have went, or if they went down, they should have left after the famine was over. They should have moved the whole family back. But life was good. Listen, when life is good, it is seductive. It is tough to voluntarily give everything up. If you followed me, you know. We gave up a beautiful home on 2 acres of land with a pool and a beautiful yard and some woods in the back. We gave up an amazing job, getting paid well, to do what we believe God called us to do, which was go, because change needed to occur. And as of this recording, we've been on the road now for almost a year, and we still have no actual understanding of where that's going to lead us. But I look back and I see what's going on, and I think, I'm glad it's tough to watch. I wish the best for them. I love them. I want the best for them. I want things to go well. Anyways, that's my personal journey. You can write to me individually if you want to hear more. God responds in 4 ways. All right, so these prayers show the character of God. First, it says God heard their groaning. He heard them. God hears. It isn't that he ignored them up until this point, or they weren't doing it right. It's that in the way that they approached him this time, it required God to respond. Remember, you get you get what you have faith for. And for years, they had faith that God was just someone, another slave master. That's the way that God was seen. He was just another all-powerful being, but he was the most powerful being. And their job was to worship him. And if they didn't worship him, things would get worse. Well, things kept getting worse. So they just kind of kept trying to worship harder. But they didn't understand. They didn't interact with God in a way that required a response. God hears, and God is going to respond. Secondly, it says he remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It isn't that God forgot it, right? And we read it and we think, he had to be reminded. What? Oh, yes, that's right. I made a promise to some guys. Let's see. That was a long time. That was years ago. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Probably should do something about that. No, it means that he's going to be giving attention to his prior promises. He'll be acting in accordance with that covenant. That's what it means, that he remembered the covenant that he made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's like, yes, yes, you cry out to me and I act accordingly. That's what that means. I remember. He didn't forget. He just hadn't been asked. God is not. See, this is another, I guess you could say, point toward the idea that he's not a puppet master. He's not going to even force his own promises on you if you don't want them. If you don't want, listen, if you don't want, he's like, do what you want. Try and work it out yourself. I am so into freedom that I am not going to force you to do this. And they didn't lose the covenant because of their behavior, because God had made it clear to Abraham that he was covering both ends of the covenant. The covenant would not be destroyed over somebody's behavior or lack of fulfillment, because God was going to cover both ends of the covenant, as God always does. So the covenant's intact, unadulterated. He's like, yes, I will act accordingly. And then it says, remember the covenant? So God looked, he saw them. That's another way of saying he looked, he saw. And it isn't that he had closed his eyes or gone on vacation, but it says that he was moved by his love and his kindness. You see, when God responds, he responds out of his character, and his character is love and kindness. It says he looked, he saw them, and he's like, wow, I love these guys. I've always loved these guys and girls. It's everybody. I love this whole nation. They are my children. And now they've invited me to get involved in their lives, and I am looking forward to that. And then it says he was concerned, or he took notice of them. And again, it isn't the idea that, this is like new information, like, oh my goodness, you're slaves? Huh, how did this happen? No, he says, I took notice, carries with it the idea that he is actually going to share the experience with them. He is going to get to know them intimately again. He's not saying, listen, I'm way up here. You guys have a lot of problems down there. This is going to take some time to work out. You've made a lot of bad choices. Thanks for inviting me in. Let me work on this. He's like, I am going to walk this out with you, because that's what a good shepherd does. He doesn't just point at his sheep and say, hey, head that direction. Come on, guys. I'm busy over here. I need to finish my lunch. Get to that other pasture, and I'll meet you there. He's like, I'm going to share it with you. I'm going to be concerned. I'm going to take notice of you. Notice everything about you. Every little nook and cranny, every wrinkle on your skin. I am going to be there for you. In other words, from my perspective, I would say that God hears these prayers and he's like, wow, I'm being invited back into relationship with people that I love, and I can't wait to get there. There's been a few times on our journey that we've run, reconnected with people that we really hadn't seen in, well, several of them, all of them over 20 years, several of them close to 30 years. And yet there was a love, there was a connection there. It was like, yes, wow, this would be amazing to do life with these people. And that's the aura that I get around these words. God's like, yes, I cannot wait to reconnect with the people that I love. This is going to be intimate. This is going to be something of a shared experience. And I look forward to it. Now, I want you to keep that in mind when we move on to the next chapters, because this is the heart of God. The heart of God is compassion, it's love, it's kindness, it's giving attention to the to his promises. It's the idea that he wants to respond, he wants to have relationship. He doesn't want to be seen as a master in heaven that is controlling everybody by his power and authority. He wants intimacy, which means you get to see into him, you see, and he gets to see into you, you see. That's into me, you see. Intimacy. And we're going to take a look at that. Ladies and gentlemen, we have finished chapter 2. I think, what was that? Please tell me, was it more than 3 weeks? Let's see, 1, 2, 3. Oh no. Okay, let's not focus on that. Let's focus on the next chapter and the next week of the epic narrative. Thanks so much for being here today.
Don't go anywhere. We've got Bob Thoughts.
Okay, I got some thoughts. I do want to touch on something where I said I'd talk a little bit more about taking dominion. I think that a lot of people have been conditioned with, especially in the Western world, to be passive, to let things happen to them. And in a lot of times we expect things to happen for us rather than taking dominion. And there's something that I think a lot of people need to work on. Now, some are, they take this independence thing more as an act of like rebellion, where they just rebel against everything. And I'm not speaking to that. I'm speaking about just that mental capacity to take the next step to free yourself from whatever you may be entangled in. And sometimes that is fairly dramatic. But it can be as simple as taking dominion over your menus. I don't want to say diet because that can conjure up all kinds of concepts. But sometimes we just need to be able to say, hey, I'm going to choose to be more healthy, and I'm going to take dominion over this. Now, sometimes we need a tool to help us. Sometimes a program or some sort of menu help or whatever can help us do that, but it shouldn't. Sometimes people get into that, and it's like, again, I'm going to choose to let this happen to me rather than I'm going to choose to take dominion over this. And it's the same with work. Sometimes people are like, well, I just have to. It's the way things, whatever. We just kind of, again, a passive approach to it rather than saying, no, I'm going to take dominion on this. Now, I don't want to take away from the idea that sometimes we have to wait to see what the Lord's going to do or what doors might open. Like I'm in currently. It's a weird space to be in. But part of the fact that I'm in this space is because we took dominion over where we were headed, which would have been, as delightful as it was to work with the people we were with, it was not going to it was not freeing us. It was, and we needed for our journey either adjustments to be made in the way things were operated, or we needed to take dominion. We needed to step out, which we did. And again, it doesn't mean that what was going on was evil or anything like that. It's just for our journey, that's part of what we did. We took dominion over our lives. Now, yes, it is difficult, and we've talked about that in other places, being in limbo, wondering what we're supposed to do next. But it's a decision that we didn't let happen to us. It's a decision that we felt, we made the decision. And so sometimes I know that taking dominion can be scary, and you might feel alone and left out and or at least spun out. And sometimes it has to do with your what's going on with your home, getting out of debt. Sometimes it has to do with as much as even something my wife and I did, which was we we became sovereign people rather than just citizens, which is a whole legal process, but it allows us to be in a position that gives us more freedom and opportunity to have more say over who we are and where we are and what we do. Now, we have not gone down much further than that, but I know people who have, and they are taking dominion over the land that they own, over the vehicles, over their credit card debt. There is a lot of ways to take dominion, and I think that is something the Lord wants us to do. It's what He put us in the garden to do. He's like, take dominion. Don't just let it happen to you. Don't just be a victim. Take dominion. And I think we all have opportunities to do that, and we can all do that, more. And we should take the next step to taking dominion, making the decisions. And if it's wrong, it's wrong. You see, that's the beauty of the kingdom, right? You have the opportunity for grace and mercy, and God's goodness is never going to not be there for you if you make a, quote, wrong decision. He's always going to be there for you. That's the beauty of the kingdom. So we'll end it there. I know it's a big subject, and I don't mean to really. If you're listening to that and you feel guilty or whatever, like, please just take it as a word of encouragement. Find something in your life that you can just take dominion over, that you can step into and try and see what happens. Because God is good all through time. And I will see you again next week on The Epic Narrative.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to this podcast on any platform you use. You can also reach out to Bob for questions or booking at thebobswitzer.com or email him at thebobswitzer@gmail.com. See you next week, guys.